In a world where everyone is trying to be heard, silence often looks like weakness. We live in an age of constant expression. People share opinions instantly, respond quickly, and often feel pressure to fill every pause in conversation. In many environments, the loudest voice appears to dominate the room. Yet, careful observation reveals something different. The calmest person in the room is sometimes the one who speaks the least. Rather than competing for attention, they watch and they listen. And when they finally speak, their words tend to carry more weight. Ancient Stoic philosophers noticed this long before the modern world became so noisy. For them, silence was not a sign of insecurity or passivity. It represented a form of discipline and self-command. It showed that a person could control their impulses rather than being controlled by them. However, it is important to understand something clearly. For the Stoics, silence itself was never the goal. Silence was simply one way to practice self-control and thoughtful speech. And in Stoic philosophy, that kind of inner control is where real strength begins. One reason the Stoics valued silence is that it allows a person to develop greater awareness. When people talk constantly, their attention is focused on expressing themselves. They think about what they will say next, how they will defend their views, or how they will respond to disagreement. In that state, observation becomes secondary. When a person chooses to listen instead of speaking immediately, the situation begins to change. Silence creates space to observe with greater precision. You begin to notice how others react, hear the tone behind their words, and see the emotions influencing the conversation. This kind of attention leads to clearer understanding. The Stoic teacher Epictetus often advised his students to be careful with their speech and to avoid speaking excessively about trivial matters. His advice reflected a broader Stoic principle. Learning often begins with observation. By listening more and reacting less, a person begins to understand situations more accurately. Wisdom often grows through attention rather than through constant speech. There is another reason silence can feel powerful. Words have lasting consequences. Once something has been spoken, it cannot easily be taken back. Many conflicts begin with a sentence spoken too quickly or too emotionally. A moment of anger can produce a statement that damages trust or escalates disagreement. The Stoics believed that self-discipline must apply not only to actions, but also to speech. A person who controls their words often demonstrates deeper control over their thoughts and emotions. That discipline reflects a stable character. This does not mean avoiding conversation or refusing to share ideas. Stoic philosophy never encourages withdrawal from society. The Stoics believe strongly in participating in community life and acting with reason and virtue. Speech remains important, but it must be used with care. For that reason, Stoicism encourages thoughtful speech. Speak when your words contribute something useful. Speak when you are calm enough to express your thoughts clearly, and avoid speaking simply to react or to prove a point. Over time, this approach changes how people perceive your words. When someone speaks constantly, their words gradually lose impact. But when a person speaks with care and restraint, others often listen more closely. Measured speech carries authority. Silence becomes especially meaningful during moments of tension or criticism. Imagine that someone challenges you or speaks harshly about something you have done. The natural response is immediate defense. Many people feel the urge to explain themselves, argue back, or correct what they believe is unfair criticism. Stoic philosophy suggests a different response. It encourages a brief pause before reacting. A moment of silence allows the mind to evaluate the situation. It restores judgment before emotion takes control. You can then ask a simple question. Is the criticism accurate? If it contains truth, it may offer an opportunity to improve. If it is based on misunderstanding, reacting emotionally rarely resolves the issue. In many situations, when one person refuses to escalate a conflict, the emotional intensity begins to decrease. Silence in this context is not surrender. It is the deliberate decision not to allow another person's words to dictate your emotional response. That restraint reflects disciplined judgment. Maintaining that level of restraint requires patience and discipline. The Stoics considered these qualities essential for a stable character. Emotional control is not suppression, but governance. It allows reason to remain in command. Stoic philosophy also reminds us that silence is not limited to conversation. It also concerns what happens within the mind itself. A quiet mind is capable of clearer judgment. Without that inner stillness, thought becomes reactive. The Roman emperor and Stoic thinker Marcus Aurelius wrote frequently about returning to inner calm. In his personal reflections, later known as meditations, he reminded himself that the mind can withdraw from external disturbances and regain clarity. That ability allows reason to remain stable. Even when the world becomes chaotic, a person can still choose how to respond internally. Modern life presents constant noise. News updates, public debates, and endless streams of opinions shared through digital platforms. Without careful attention, this environment easily overwhelms the mind. Mental discipline becomes necessary. Stoic practice therefore encourages a different approach. Instead of reacting to every opinion or absorbing every conflict, a person can step back and decide what truly deserves attention. This act of selection protects mental clarity. Attention becomes deliberate rather than scattered. Inner silence does not mean ignoring reality. It means maintaining the clarity needed to respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively. When the mind is calm, it becomes easier to think rationally, make balanced decisions, and act with integrity. Calm judgment produces stable action. Developing this kind of silence does not happen overnight. Like many Stoic practices, it grows through small habits repeated over time. Discipline forms gradually through daily conduct. Stability is built through repetition. One useful habit is pausing briefly before responding during emotionally charged conversations. Even a few seconds of reflection can prevent words that might later be regretted. Another habit is listening fully before forming a response. Many people begin preparing their reply while the other person is still speaking, which means they are no longer truly listening. Allowing someone to finish their thoughts leads to a more complete understanding of what they are trying to communicate. A third habit is speaking with intention. Before responding, it can be helpful to ask a simple question. Will these words improve the situation, or are they simply a reaction to emotion? Over time, these small adjustments strengthen self-control and produce calmer conversations. Communication becomes deliberate rather than reactive. Speech gains greater weight because it is used carefully. As a modern reflection on Stoic ideas, you might try a simple exercise. For one day, observe how often you feel the urge to interrupt, defend yourself immediately, or fill a quiet moment with unnecessary words. Instead of reacting automatically, pause and observe the situation. you may notice that conversations become calmer when there is less pressure to respond instantly. Listening more carefully often produces deeper understanding. The change comes from attention rather than effort. This exercise is not about withdrawing from communication. It is about becoming more aware of how and when you speak. Awareness strengthens discipline. In the end, Stoic philosophy does not claim that silence alone makes someone powerful. Instead, it teaches that the discipline behind silence, self-control, careful attention, and emotional balance, strengthens a person's character. That discipline forms the foundation of Stoic strength. In a world filled with noise and quick reactions, the ability to remain calm and deliberate stands apart. Silence is not emptiness. It is often the space in which understanding develops. Words spoken from reflection carry greater meaning